Hello and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Brunswick. My name is Shannon Gilmore. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees. I'm pleased to welcome you today to our service entitled The Greatest of These is Love, being led by Interim Minister Reverend Justine Sullivan. Our charity with soul for the month of February is the Mid-Coast Humane Society. Juno and I invite you to give generously. Thank you. Enjoy today's service. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Our opening words this morning are by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, An Experiment in Love. The nonviolent resistor not only refuses to shoot his opponent, but he also refuses to hate him. At the center of nonviolence stands the principle of love. To retaliate in kind would do nothing but intensify the existence of hate in the universe. Along the way of life, someone must have sense enough and morality enough to cut off the chain of hate. This can only be done by projecting the ethic of love to the center of our lives. Come, let us be together in worship, and let us sing together our opening song, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place.
When our heart is in a holy place, we are blessed with love and Hello and good morning. My name is Toben and I serve as your Director of Religious Exploration. Today is Valentine's Day, so of course we're going to be talking about love. The story I have for you is a very beautiful song about love written by an amazing artist named Bob Marley. The book is by his daughter, and I think you might recognize some of the words. I hope you enjoy. One Love, based on the song by Bob Marley, adapted by Cadella Marley, with illustrations by Vanessa Bentley Newton. One love, one heart, let's get together and feel all right. One love, what my family gives to me. One love, what the flower gives the bee. One love, what Mother Earth gives the tree. One love, one heart, let's get together and feel all right. One heart, like the birds, I long to be free. One love, like the river runs to the sea. One heart, like the music, just feel the beat. Let's get together and feel all right. One love, when your hand reaches out for me. One heart, when we touch, a new world we'll see. One love, one heart, let's get together and feel all right.
William Matthew wrote the piece that we're going to hear as part of our meditation this morning. It is called Love, Light, and Guidance Round. The text, translated from the Arabic, is simply, God is love, lover, and beloved. I know that not all of us are comfortable with the word God, but for me, God is just one word for that which cannot be fully named. In this song, God's name is Allah, and Allah is just another name for the love that weaves between and among us and encircles us all. As you listen to our own trio, Ambrosia, sing this song, let yourself be held in the embrace of however you experience the holy. Let us be together for a moment now in meditation and prayer.
Ya Hadi Allah, Ya Nuri Allah, İşkala mabulila, mabulila. Ya Hadi Allah, Ya Nuri Allah, İşkala mabulila, mabulila, Ya Hadi Allah, Ya Nuri Allah, İşkala mabulila, mabulila, Ya Hadi İşkala, Ya Nuri Allah, İşkala mabulila, İşkala
Our reading this morning is from 1 Corinthians chapter 13. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but I do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three. And the greatest of these is love.
Oh,
Thank you, choir, for that beautiful song. A month or two ago, I told Heidi about this service that I had envisioned in honor of Valentine's Day, a service about love, and she said, I have the perfect song, and she was right. And let us remember, folks, that beautiful ensemble that we get to hear is put together one voice at a time. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, choir. Thank you, Derek, for the beautiful accompaniment. And thank you to all our musicians who make this magic happen every week. There are many songs written about love, especially about romantic love. Across a crowded room, our eyes met, and then there it was. Zing went the strings of my heart. So many love songs. And then, of course, on the other side, there are the love gone wrong songs. Oh, baby, why do you treat me so bad? How could you leave me? Please come back. So many songs about love and about heartbreak. But the words we heard from Paul's letter to the people of Corinth, although they are often read at weddings, love is patient, love is kind, were not really about that kind of love. Paul, like most of the earliest followers of Jesus, believed that Jesus would soon return within their lifetimes. Paul told people, if you're already married, okay, but if you're single, don't bother getting married. There's not time for that. We've got to get ready for Jesus' return, and we have to be worthy. And Paul made it his mission to let everybody know what they needed to do to be worthy, to get ready for Jesus' return. The admonition in Paul's letter to the Corinthians was about love, yes, but it was really about love for God in the way that Jesus taught. We show our love for God by loving one another, not with flowers and chocolate, but by caring for one another. Feed the hungry, heal the sick, welcome the stranger, because we are all God's beloveds. A little bit later in that same letter, Paul talks about speaking in tongues. And he says, speaking in tongues, it's all well and good, but not if people can't understand you. And that's, when he says, if you could speak in tongues but have not love, you're like a noisy gong. He was not about the noisy gong. He wanted people to be able to understand one another. Relationship is important. That's how we show our love for God, by loving one another. That's what Jesus taught, and that's what Paul proclaimed in most of his letters. And it's really not such a far journey from love one another to affirming the inherent worth and dignity of all people, as our first principle of Unitarian Universalism tells us. Love one another. God is love, lover, and beloved. But friends, hasn't that call to love one another, to see the divine spark, the inherent worth and dignity in everyone, hasn't that been extra tough this week? Even if you haven't watched the impeachment trial, and I recognize that by the time this sermon airs, we may already have a verdict. But even if you hadn't watched it, you would have a hard time avoiding those horrific videos on an endless loop, like watching the planes hitting the Twin Towers on September 11th. In this case, videos of people, our fellow humans, torturing police officers, desecrating the halls of our U.S. Capitol, calling for violence, calling for executions of former Vice President Pence, Speaker Pelosi. We saw video of members of Congress and their staff running for their lives. We heard them whisper their goodbyes to loved ones into their cell phones as they hid from the attackers. How are we supposed to love that? How do we find the inherent worth and dignity there? We don't. Not in that behavior. And wouldn't it be easier if those who attacked our capital were in fact monsters or aliens from another planet or even wild animals accidentally set loose? But no, they were not monsters or space aliens or wild animals. They were human beings, fellow human beings, siblings. And isn't that what hurts most of all? That we humans could be capable of such cruelty. But this isn't a sermon about impeachment or cruelty. It's a sermon about love. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King certainly witnessed and experienced great cruelty and violence. Inspired by the struggle for independence won in India through the use of nonviolence, Dr. King encouraged his followers to grapple with the contradictions inherent in a country which claimed to love justice and freedom, and yet tolerated injustice and mistreatment of large portions of its people. There are some things to which we ought to be maladjusted, King said. Some things are unacceptable. And he doesn't tell the folks suffering the ills of racial oppression to simply bear it, to wait for a better day. No, he calls them to rise up, but not with weapons of war, but with love. Love for each other, love for themselves, love even for those who hate them. King said the way of violence leads to bitterness in the survivors and brutality in the destroyers. But the way of nonviolence leads to redemption and the creation of the beloved community. Martin Luther King borrowed the term beloved community from the 20th century philosopher Josiah Royce, who saw beloved community as an ideal to strive for. A loyalty by an individual to the community. For King, the idea of beloved community stemmed from the Greek term agape, a word that doesn't translate directly into English, which has just one word for love. Agape, often translated as brotherly love to distinguish it from romantic love, refers to an unselfish love of one person for the whole community, for the collective, for the greater good of all humanity. So, beloved community is the lived expression of agape, of deep and abiding love for each other. In ancient times, if two people met each other while traveling, they would introduce themselves by listing all of their ancestors. We see this now in the do you know conversations that we so often have when we meet one another and learn where we are from. They did this in the hope of uncovering a shared ancestor, which meant that this new person could be trusted as a part of our tribe. If a person was found to be outside of the tribe, they were seen and dealt with as an enemy, as a potential competitor for scarce resources. At times in our human history, evildoers have used that fear of the stranger and that worry about scarcity to fan the flames of hatred. I believe that is what the former president has done, what he's on trial for. He has exploited fear and encouraged his followers not to love their neighbor, but to define anyone who opposes him as an enemy. And I am struggling with loving those who have caused such harm. And I mean to keep struggling. But you know what? There is important work to be done right here. I can forgive myself for holding some resentment toward those who have caused such suffering. But I believe there are opportunities for me, for all of us, to reach across what separates us from the people that we ought to be in relationship with. I'm reminded of an experience I had at General Assembly many years ago. The don't ask, don't tell policy was still in place, and there was a resolution before the General Assembly of our UU community to support the abolition of don't ask, don't tell. So let's get rid of don't ask, don't tell. And I went into the plenary hall assuming that this would be a very easy, feel-good resolution because, of course, as a gentle, loving people, we were all opposed to the restrictive policy, don't ask, don't tell. Just to remind us all, this was the policy that said that you could serve in the military as a gay person as long as you didn't tell anyone. So the resolution went forth, and as is the custom, microphones were set up with the pro mic over here and the con mic over here and the procedural mic right in the middle. And much to my surprise, there were lines forming at both the pro and the con mic. There were people who were opposing this resolution getting rid of don't ask, don't tell. And it was unmistakable. The people in the pro line were mostly white, and the people in the con line were mostly black, or there were many black people in the con line. And the argument against supporting this resolution was, by the black folks in the line, you know, the military is the one place where people of color, especially African Americans, have been able to advance, right? The military was desegregated long before other parts of American society was desegregated. And so we don't want to mess with that. We're afraid that if we encourage our black siblings who are serving in the military to come out as gay, we weren't even talking about trans issues then, if we were to encourage them, it's safe to come out as gay, this could somehow or other backfire. And if something was going to backfire, it was going to backfire for black folks first. That's the way things go. I hadn't even thought about that. But I took it in and I was moved by that argument and really wondered, you know, what would I do? Because I certainly didn't want don't ask, don't tell to continue, but I didn't want to disavow or disregard the serious concerns that my siblings of color had. So it went back and forth, pro and con, pro and con. And then someone used the parliamentary move under Robert's rules to call the question, meaning if a majority of those present want to stop debate, we will stop talking about it and then we can take the vote. Well, as you might guess, majority ruled. And in this case, that meant that mostly white people voted to stop talking about this. And the black folks wanted to keep talking about this. But it's Robert's rules, majority rules. So we stopped the debate, and we voted, and the resolution passed, but with many black and brown folks voting no. My heart was breaking. That an issue that I thought was one of justice that we would have consensus around was in and of itself so divisive. There was a lot of murmuring, and I just didn't know what we were going to do. And then a woman appeared at the procedural microphone, an African-American woman, a leader in our movement, and she asked to be recognized, and she said, "Madam Moderator, I realize that the time for debate on this issue has ended, but might we take a moment for prayer?" The room fell silent. A room with 4,000 people in it fell silent. There is nothing like the sound of 4,000 people holding silence together. It remains, more than 10 years later, one of the most sacred moments I have experienced in community. That call for prayer, and I think it's significant that it was an African-American woman that called for that prayer. I'd like to think it could have been any of us. But that call for prayer, bringing us back to why we were there together, that we were a people of faith, gathered to do business, yes, but first and foremost, we were a community of faith. That moment of shared silence, that prayer for peace in community, that prayer for healing, got us back on track. A group of people who had so much in common, finding this terrible division, a moment of rupture followed by chaos, brought back together by a call for prayer, a call for a centering. Many of us here in Brunswick recently had the opportunity to watch a film called The Reunited States. It tells the story of one couple who decided to travel across the country, a white couple, to meet people who were different from them. In fact, they were both Republicans. He had been a Republican operative, we might say, worked on campaigns. And I'm not sure what the catalyst was. We never really learned that, but something inside this man said, I don't even know my fellow Americans. I want to know them. I want to know their hearts. So they dropped everything, traveled cross country, and it was filmed as they traveled. And there were beautiful moments that we as the film goers got to witness. Moments of connection, moments of personal transformation. But my friends, we don't need to cross the country to find barriers that divide us, and to do what we can to grow the beloved community. I would suggest to you that that moment that I shared with you from General Assembly, where we disagreed about a policy and then came back together as one people, was a moment of creating beloved community. Creating the beloved community means recognizing that we are all one people. That if we go back far enough, we can all find a common ancestor, whether you believe that was Adam and Eve, or some single-cell organism which eventually grew into reptile, then mammal, then primate, then human. We are all part of the same tribe, all children of creation. Making it clear that we intend to be on the side of love, we can condemn the brutal acts of violence by one police officer, for example, or one police department without condemning them all. And certainly the events on our Capitol, January 6th, really shook up that idea about the blue lives mattering, right? It was the people that were involved in that insurrection are probably the ones that have those Blue Lives Matter signs on their front lawns. But on that day, they endangered the lives of many police officers. Certainly there are justice-loving officers and soldiers who risk their lives to keep us all safe, again, as we saw at our Capitol. Don't let the ones, those people who would divide us, tell us whom we're supposed to welcome, whom we're supposed to love. All are welcome in this beloved community, all who love their neighbor, all who seek justice, all who are willing to grapple with the difficult questions in faithful ways, to help bend the moral arc toward justice, to create more love and more beauty and more peace. And yes, the greatest of these is love. Come, let us sing together our closing song, hymn number 95, There Is More Love. Poet Joy Harjo says all acts of kindness are lights in the war for justice. Let us shine our light, my friends, in these dark times, and let us continue to be maladjusted to the injustice around us. And let us continue to welcome all those who would join us in creating and sustaining the beloved community. May it be so. Amen. Blessed be. Ashe.